So you've got 700 total acres that you're tapping and 47,000 taps.
Yes.
A year.
Yes, every year. With labor rates, the overtime pay changes that are coming in New York State, you have to embrace technology.
Wow.
So quite a variation in weather, but the trend is warmer than what we're used to, so we're tending to tap earlier. And we think it's truly a great way for you to sweeten your products and know that it's healthier than other alternatives.
Can you tap a tree every year, or do you have to, is there like a retirement that trees go through? You can only tap them so many times? So you're Dan,
Yes.
and this is Schoolyard Sugarbush.
That's correct.
I've been practicing that name for like a week now. I feel like it's a big tongue twister. You have a really, to me anyway, a really amazing setup here. So you call yourself small, but you told me that you have 700 acres of tapped maple trees that you use to make a variety of products, and we're standing in the middle of some of that. You can kind of see like the tubes behind us. So tell me a little bit about how this got started for you.
So our family started with 12 taps in the yard of a one-room schoolhouse.
Okay.
So that's how the name Schoolyard Sugarbush came about, is that, you know, it started very small and primitive. It's been quite an evolution of process. So in the early days, we used all buckets and tapped the century-old maple trees right there in the yard. It grew a little bit, you know, every year. So when we got to about 200 taps after 3 years, everything was pails. We carried them, or we put 15-gallon drums on a toboggan, filled those, and then drug them back. That was not exactly the most efficient method.
Yeah.
So today we've converted, we have a few pails that we put out just for demonstration purposes.
Okay.
Everything's on tubing like you see here. It's a plastic that is very flexible. It's specifically geared towards maple syrup production.
Okay.
So all the tubing runs downhill, either a collection tank, or in this case, this is like what you want to see, it runs right into the sugar house. So that's
So there's like
really
no contamination whatsoever.
No
then.
contamination. You don't have bark falling in the sap. You don't have bugs, you know, jumping in the sap in the woods. And then, you know, it's transported right to the facility, so it's less jostling and stuff of the sap on, you know, in the whole process.
So I know almost nothing about it. So give me a little like info about what's going on, how you tap a maple tree.
So when in the springtime, and the biggest question of late is, when is springtime anymore? Because like this past year, we weren't sure if we were having winter. We had about 6 days that were below freezing, and then from there on it was sap weather. That makes it very difficult to know when to start. We like to see a long period of cold, and we can get the taps in, get things ready and going. But the last 6-7 years, from the day we start tapping, we start boiling sap. It's just been warm enough that we start getting sap. So we've always started, I shouldn't say always, in the last 15 years, we've always tried to start right around the 1st of January. And we're finding even that's a little bit late for this area with the current weather.
What is it that shows you that that's late?
The season's ending earlier. It's extreme warm sometimes, and the better sap weather seems to be the month of December, mostly in January.
Wow.
Rather than what I would traditionally say as February and March. Consequently, we're changing some things, trying to adapt. There's a lot of talk about, you know, what's causing this. It's all above my pay grade. I can't say specifically what's causing it or what it will go to be. All I know is, you know, what we've done in the past isn't necessarily going to work in the future.
Is that because then, are you saying that the season is ending quicker, so you're not getting as much sap, versus if you tap sooner, you'll get more?
Yes. So ideally, we want to be in the time frame that it's above freezing during the day and not in the 60 and 70 degree range. We want to see high 30s, 40s, maybe 50 degrees.
Okay.
And then down around 25 at night. That's like the ideal. Okay. There's a lot of variables: barometric pressure, wind speed, wind direction, sun angle, all that plays a role. So we never know for sure what we'll get for sap, but we know if it's above freezing, we should see some volume of sap.
Okay.
When I was a child, you know, it was be March before we saw weather that we would ever want to tap.
And you're from the area?
Yes. So that's quite a change for us. Will it go back that way? I don't know for sure. We have had a couple years where it was like that, more into February. and we've seen some snow volume. One of our woods is 2,000 feet in elevation. It's only 6 miles from here.
Wow.
And 3 years ago, the snow was this deep. So we had, main lines that were chest high, and we had to dig them out. They were under about a foot of snow. Quite a variation in weather, but the trend is warmer than what we're used to. So we're tending to tap earlier.
Okay. Does that affect the tree's health at all?
Well, it's definitely going to affect how the tree performs and the growth rates. Because if the tree's used to a dormant time frame, we're really not getting that. Although the leaves come off the tree, we still have fall,
right.
As is typical. It's not getting that substantially cold time frame. The trees probably are growing faster because they have more of a growth period. But that dormancy cold span that tends to set the sap into the roots, we're not seeing that like we used to.
Yeah.
So we are seeing decent sugar content, although when you don't get the refreeze during the cycles of sap run, the sap doesn't go back down to the roots, so we don't get regeneration of sugar content in the sap. So you see a slow decline in sugar content for sap. How does that affect things? Like 2% sap is what we would all hope to have, or maybe a little bit higher. That's going to be, between 38 and 43 gallons to make a gallon of syrup. What we tend to see is it stays warm and gets warmer, that sugar content declines down to about 1.25 to 1%. And that at 1%, it's 86 gallons to make a gallon of syrup. So it's a lot more work. The reverse osmosis machines do a lot of that work, so it's not like, we're using a lot more energy with the evaporator, but it definitely is harder for the reverse osmosis machines, and we don't get as much product.
Right.
So, because we'll get about the same amount of sap, it'll just be lower sugar, so you don't make as much syrup.
Yeah. You said as a kid, then you were getting basically more sap than what you're getting now, in a sense. From like a business perspective, how are you to manage that? I mean, you were a kid doing it. You weren't exactly, like the leader of the business. And now that you are, how do you manage that variability?
So I should clarify, we got better weather when I was younger, or more ideal weather. I like to not have to plow snow. So in that regard, it's good. So that variation is just presenting challenge. I technically make more syrup today than I did when I was a child per tap. And the reasons why is because we've implemented better technology in the woods. So, using vacuum on the tubing, but our goal is to see a half gallon of syrup per tap or more. And it's been harder to achieve that in this region because of the warmer weather.
Okay.
So we have achieved that. Our best yield in this area for us, our business was 0.6 of a gallon of syrup per tap.
Okay.
And that was in 2011, which was a great year. We haven't seen quite that high since. We've had a couple that were right at the half a gallon, and then quite a few that were in the 0.4. But like last year, with the timing that we had for tapping and some family issues, deaths, of workers, families, or whatever, we were lower.
Yeah.
We just couldn't get the taps in fast enough. With 47,000, it takes a few weeks to get the taps in.
Yeah. Let's highlight that number. So you've got 700 total acres that you're tapping and 47,000 taps.
Yes.
A year.
Yes, every year.
Holy crap, that's a lot.
Each tree has a tap on it. Some might have two if they're larger. So somebody has to physically go to each one of these drop lines that you see. These two are hanging down.
In this
and
tree?
Then often you'll see a loop. Somebody goes and puts a new piece of plastic, which is the tap or the spout, as some people would call it.
Okay.
We put that into the plastic. We drill a new hole in the tree. We use they call it a precision tapper. It's an adapter that goes on a drill, which is basically like making it a drill press, so that it's a true round hole that we get in the tree. We drill a 5/16 hole, 1.5 inches deep.
Okay.
When I was younger, we used to do a 1/2 inch hole, a 7/16 bit, and that would go about 3 inches deep. So there's less staining of the tree, which is better for the tree health long term. So in that regard, it's much better. And then, the guys will set those taps, and then every day we check for for leaks. So the system, although the sap flows downhill to the sugar house, we use a vacuum pump, and that helps continually pull the sap away from the tap hole, because there's always bacteria from residual organic material in the pipe, and so consequently we want to keep that away from the tap hole, because that bacteria is what helps build the process to cause the tap hole to seal over. Sooner that seals over, the less sap we get. It's really not a number of zero ever as far as bacteria, but we want to be as close to zero as possible when we start. That way it lasts longer.
Yeah. Can you tap a tree every year, or do you have to, is there like a retirement that trees go through? You can only tap them so many times?
So we have some trees that have been tapped and documentable that are over 100 years, the same trees.
Wow.
Some have died, due to decline. Some, are fully and the best producers out there. The more leaves you see on a tree, the tendency is for it to have higher sugar content.
Oh.
The name Sugarbush was synonymous for like a maple orchard, something that was tended or kept for the purpose of making sap for syrup.
Okay.
So consequently, in the days before reverse osmosis machines, the idea was, let's get higher sugar content out of the trees, and that way we have to boil less. Today, the reverse osmosis machine does most of that changing for us. So we don't stress about it as much and have more of a diverse forest that could be used for logging purposes, a little bit more diversity in species and density.
Okay.
But in the early days, the sugar bush would have very large crown trees, more like what you would see in the dooryard.
Yeah.
Just a big maple tree with lots of limbs and tons of canopy, covering 75% of that stem. Yeah. Today, when you come into the forest, you'll see maybe 30 to 35, hopefully 40% coverage of the stem with leaves. Consequently, we tend to see a little bit lower sugar. So some of those old trees that have lots of canopy might put out 3, 4, I've even seen 5% sugar sometimes. So, when you see that, they call it the rule of 86. You divide the sugar content by 86, and that'll tell you approximately how many gallons it'll take to make a gallon of syrup. Obviously, 1% sap, 86 gallons to make a gallon of syrup. 2%, 3, if you can get to 4%, now you're 21 and a half.
Yeah.
It's a big difference. So we love to see, lots of leaves, better sugar content in the end.
So then talk to me a little bit about how you manage your forests. I imagine that you can't really put animals out here other than the ones that are wild.
Yes.
So how do you manage your forest to make sure that you are getting better leaves, healthier trees, good ground coverage, soil health? Like, how do you do all of that?
So in the beginning, we did just primarily with chainsaws, manual labor. This wood's the area that we're in. When we bought this 10 years ago, everything was cut with chainsaw that we did work on. So any of the saplings that you see, there's some small saplings and shoots coming up in here.
Like these
those
ones.
will have, in the next 2 or 3 years need to be thinned so that we manage what we want to see grow and what we don't want to see grow. We're really trying to cut down on invasive species or what we consider to be daylight robbers, trees that don't have long-term value in the wood stand. They're not going to produce income. Whereas if we see something that's, oak, ash, cherry, maple, even some hickory, this woods has a lot of hickory in it, birch trees, we try to foster that growth. There are some areas in here that are pine, but today we also have started to use a little bit of mechanization for this. We bought a skid steer with a brush cutter attachment. So we can actually come in if it's not too steep. A lot of this ground is steep.
Yeah.
So we have to be really careful. We're limited where we can go. But that can do things about 20 times as fast, and the person isn't wore out at the end of the day. It's still work running the machine, but it's not the same as running a chainsaw for 8 or 10 hours.
Well, and that leads me to a great question next, is how long does it take to do that? I mean, you have 700 acres across, would you say 4 counties?
Yes.
Off camera. So you got 4 counties, 700 acres total. Do you have just like a whole crew of people that just go out, or is it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
So a lot of times people see me and they think, oh, wow, how do you get it all done?
Yeah.
I don't. That's the answer. The list is never blank. There's always a big list with priority scales for it. And then the team of guys, they're really what makes it happen. We have people in the office, we have people that help packaging, we have people that help label, and then, you know, guys that work in the woods currently. And during season, everybody that can goes to the woods and helps with the tubing, because leak checking, getting the sap to the sugar house is how we make living in maple. You know, it's great to have the sugar house look nice and have all these fancy pieces of equipment and make it look great, but that's not what makes any money. The money's made in the woods by the trees producing sap and then getting that to the sugar house.
Yeah. Can we try to walk to a tree? I don't know which one would be closest, and we can try to like see what the sap looks like up close, or what the lines look like up close.
Yeah, we can go right here. So of course there's always some debris, grapevine, or a little bit of berry lines to deal with.
So this is the line, the main line.
So this is what we call a lateral line. So this is 5/16. These are compression style fittings, although it's not a compression clamp. So you notice that we use a tool and we push the pipe over barbs that are here, and you can pull on that. It won't come apart. The pipe will damage first. So every tree is connected to a lateral line. And then it also has what we call a drop line. Sometimes you'll see there's a little bit of residual sap in a drop line. So we don't add other items into the sap lines. We found we're better off to let the sap, when we're done at the end of the year, we just run the vacuum pumps and let the vacuum pull sap into the sugar house.
Other companies do?
Some do, some don't.
Like what kind? Like an antifreeze or something?
So they'll use some kind of a cleaner, whether it be like a chlorine-based solution. And there's a lot of discussion about this, and we may have to change that as time goes on, because with warmer temperatures comes more bacteria build. But currently that's what we do, is we just use the vacuum pump to evacuate the lines. We know that the sap, if it stays in the pipe, if there's a little bit of that, it's going to eventually ferment and form, you know, like an alcohol. So it's all natural, and it's the exact material that we know we want. Yeah. So in the spring, once we tap the tree, we'll drill a hole. So we're going to be looking at the tree to see, okay, is this tree still healthy? Do I need to put a tap in it, or should I wait another year? Because if the tree's looking poor and we're worried about it, you know, mortality, we will just hold off tapping that, take this right out, and then let it sit for a while dormant.
What would an unhealthy tree look like?
We would start to see dead limbs, or some bark abnormality. This one's fine, so I'm not worried about that. But we're going to be looking for limbs overhead and roots underneath. Sometimes the roots are hard to see, because I've seen years where we're tapping and we're able to walk over these pipes with the snowshoes and not even step on them. We have to dig down to find the loop. You know, some of them are this high. But you know, that's the difference. So when it's like that, you can't really see the roots, but we're looking up and down, and then looking for a good place in the tree to put the tap. So what that would be is we look for a spot that doesn't have any defects. Like, it wouldn't be good to tap here.
Oh, because it's like a knot?
Right. Okay. So we could tap here. There's no defect here or around that. Or an old tap hole. If we see an old tap hole like here.
Oh, like that.
We want to be away from that. And this is a good example. This particular tree was tapped using the vacuum to pull the sap up from the tree, because these lines are so high. Sometimes it'll be above, sometimes it'll be below on a line where this might be a little abnormally high. We try to look for good wood, white wood, when we drill the hole, and that way we know the sap will flow in that point. If we see dead wood, we're going to either have to re-drill the hole or forego the tree for the year.
If you see an unhealthy tree, like maybe, do you write that down in a record somewhere? Like, this particular tree 50210 is not good, we're not going to tap it this year?
No, we don't necessarily write it down. We don't have the taps numbered. All the main lines are numbered. You know, you think 255 acres and you have a crew of, you know, approximately 10 people. Somebody will be like, well, you know, over there on that road, you know, by the tree with the crook in it, and it gets very cryptic in description. So every main line has a number. If somebody tells me like C12, I know which wet dry system it is in the woods, and then which side of the wet dry it'll be. whether it's left or right, based on if it's even or odd numbers. That'll tell us just from that numeric listing. And then they can say, you know, about halfway down, you'll find a lateral that, you know, or there's a tree limb that's down.
Gotcha.
So that kind of information gets documented, and we use text message a lot.
Yeah.
Group text, we all don't like it,
Uh-huh.
but it's necessary so that everybody knows, hey, this needs to be done. If you run short on something to do today, try and take care of that. So the vacuum has helped us be able to tell where leaks are a lot better in the system. You know, if a sap line is dripping, because squirrels love to chew on these pipes, and
I bet.
there's a lot of debate about what makes that happen, but salt from our hands often is part of the culprit. The squirrels will come along and they'll chew on tubing. Sometimes it's another animal in the woods, or sometimes people cut or break a pipe, not realizing they catch it on, you know, clothing or a piece of equipment or something. We've seen that happen.
Gotcha.
God forbid somebody that was hunting. Some of the land that we tap is leased, and I think we've had 4 gunshot holes in pipe now.
That's kind of like a lucky shot, though.
Well, either lucky or really bad.
That's true.
But nonetheless, it leaves a large hole. But the vacuum makes it very easy for us to tell there's a leak there, because one, you'll hear it, or you'll see it. If it's in that temperature range in the 30s, typically it'll frost up. Even just a little teeny tiny pinhole will frost up and make it real clear to see. In every main line, that pipe, the larger pipe that you see, every one of those is numbered. It also has a vacuum sensor on it, and they communicate with each other through the woods. They're solar powered, so they charge via solar power, and then they use Bluetooth technology to communicate with each other, and they'll bounce signal back and forth and then down to a gateway. The gateway will communicate with the cloud, and then we all have access to that data on the cloud. Documentation tells us temperature and vacuum level. With that information, we can tell, is it a big leak? Is it a small leak? We can also see, you know, historically how it's been. Like, this is always doing this, or this is just an oddity. So there's so much data that we can glean at night. We can analyze this kind of stuff. And then in the morning, even though it might be below freezing, the guys can come to the woods and start leak checking, because they already know, hey, this line has probably a tap out, or there's a main line broken. There's enough information that they'll be able to find that while it's still freezing. Years ago, we didn't have that technology, so you kind of had to wait for it to start to thaw out. You might be able to tell there was a big leak, but these small leaks, micro leaks, were really hard to find that way.
So with that, talk to me a little bit about the technology. You seem really excited and well versed in the technology that you get to use now. But when you were a kid, you said you were just using buckets, and you kind of got started using buckets. I think that some people, maybe especially in the ag field, get a little turned off when it comes to adding technology. Talk to me a little bit about the technology.
So with labor rates, overtime pay changes that are coming in New York State, you have to embrace technology. I don't know how many times as a young person I went to the woods to check the sap tank to find nothing. And, that involves getting up in the middle of the night. Today, I can turn my phone on, look, and I know exactly what's in the tank based on a tank level sensor.
Yeah.
Is it expensive? Yes, it's always expensive, but fuel's expensive, time's expensive. And I don't mind going if I'll get up and go haul sap in the middle of the night if it's there.
Right.
Getting there and finding nothing is discouraging. So that helps a lot. We're now able to actually turn on vacuum pumps, reverse osmosis machines. It's coming to the point where evaporators will be fully automated. There are some that are that way, and there are even a few sugar houses that are fully automated. Somebody in an office has a big picture window looking through it. Somebody goes down and opens valves to put syrup into the tanks. However, in the woods, there's not much automation other than vacuum sensors. I do believe that we'll start to see implementation of other bits of technology in combination, whether it's infrared sensors, sensing, where is it freezing. Some of that might be applicable, but currently vacuum level and temperature in the woods are really the main things. And then, the application of vacuum pumps and the engineering your tubing system so that you're able to separate the gas and the sap. When we drill the hole in the tree, we don't just get sap. We also get a gas from the tree. So carbon dioxide is always emitted from organic material. So the tree is actually emitting a small amount of that. When you put it in vacuum, it expands.
Yeah.
And so consequently, you'll get vapor locks. When you look at this system, the lateral main lines are the 3/4 inch lines that are running side to side. We did replace recently some of this woods. We're converting all to 1-inch lateral mains because we get better transfer of vacuum and separation of that gas and sap. So on these 3/4 inch lines, it's going to run slightly downhill to the wet dry lines.
Okay.
And we separate that gas and sap in that pipe. However, when we go on a steep grade, which this woods is steep, we have to separate them in 2 separate pipes. So we'll have what we call a whip,
Like
which
right
allows
here.
the gas to go up and over into the dry line.
Okay.
And then the sap will come down into the bottom pipe and then down through the woods.
So this is the gas line, and that's the sap line.
Yes. So
Interesting.
the theory, it's not always applicable, but the theory is that when the sap is flowing by with gas in it, the gas is going to go up and down the dry line, and the sap will go down the wet line.
Right.
With the new tubing, we're trying to convert to all Ys and stainless steel. However, some of this is going to be a plastic fitting. We know the stainless doesn't break as often,
Right.
is what it comes down to.
Gotcha.
And then this, we're slowly converting the woods, all of it over to 1-inch. We started using exclusively 1-inch in the woods 4 years ago. That helps quite a bit.
Yeah.
If there's a leak on this pipe, you'll see some sap come up and through this. That's why my comment that, the theory is
Yeah.
application, it's not clinical in the woods. So there are always, leaks or disturbed pipe elevation, and that'll change how it flows. That's part of what the woods crew does, is going through and checking elevation and trying to keep the sap flowing properly and as quickly as possible.
Gotcha. Okay, so we made it down the hill.
Yes, we made it down the hill, and we're now at the sugar house, so
So-
we can go in and see the building and where we make the syrup and
Yeah.
package.
Are these the lines where it comes from?
Most of what you see here is all sap line, although there's some domestic water,
Okay.
like the water hose. But
So like these green lines.
all this green and black right here that you see on these stands are pipes, sap coming off the hill, or the transfer of gas and vacuum ultimately to the woods.
And it's going to come in this building
It's
here.
going to come into this building. We'll
Okay.
go in and see the releaser. So this is where the sap enters the building, and where we introduce the vacuum onto the tubing. So the vacuum's coming in this 3-inch pipe. There's 2 vacuum pumps behind this wall. There's 7, well, they're 103 CFM each. And they're 3-phase with a variable frequency drive. We try to use those so that we can cut down on power consumption when we don't need it. Each line is coming into this releaser, and the sap, when it's flowing, I've got some video footage I'll be more than glad to show. But the sap coming into this releaser, sometimes we'll see flow rates on this particular woods of almost 2,000 gallons an hour.
That seems like a lot.
It's pretty fast, but when you think the number of taps that are here, it's not too surprising. So if we have a day where we're seeing 5,000 per hour across the whole woods, for us that's pretty good. Which, you think about, that's a lot. One of those tanker trucks about every hour, it'll keep the crew quite busy.
Wow.
Running and collecting sap, hauling it. So this has pumps in the bottom of it. It uses a submersible well pump. We have two 2-horsepower pumps, and they pump into the sap tanks that are out back. So each one of those tanks holds about 7,000 gallons of sap. We have 3 of those. So we can hold about 21,000 gallons before it starts overflowing. The goal is to not ever get them all full. The goal is to start the equipment and get rolling.
Yeah.
So once we see sap levels increasing through the monitoring, we can see tank levels increasing. We use cameras so we can see the flow rate,
okay.
How it's coming in the releaser, that everything's functioning properly. Then someone will come and start ROs, or reverse osmosis machines. The 2 that we have in here currently are what we would consider manual ROs. In other words, you have to physically come and start the unit. Reverse osmosis machines are truly very simple. There's just a lot of working parts. It's a high pressure filter. So we filter the sap through a water filter in this canister, just like you would in a whole house filter. Then the sap is pressurized to go to 2 high pressure pumps. So there's a feed pump that's going to run about 100 PSI, and then it goes into high pressure pumps that are going to take it up between well, ultimately 400 psi. It can max out around 500. So those pumps are going to push the sap through what's a membrane, which is like a really dense filter. And those are the long tubes that you see right here. This is double membranes per post on this particular unit. You'll see 2 membranes there. So this machine is supposed to be, they say it'll handle 3,600 gallons an hour, but in practical use, it's about 1,800 gallons an hour that it'll process.
So what is it really doing for the sap? Is it taking away the boiler?
It's
or is it
taking
just
away
filtering?
the water. So we're separating pure water, just like what you would buy in the store as drinking water. Most of the time drinking water is reverse osmosis produced. So what they're trying to do when they run it through for water is to remove impurities. So it's pure water. What we're trying to do is to remove the water to keep all the other. So the 100% of what was sugar from the tree stays. Any bacteria, any yeast or something like that will stay with the sap, or the concentrate as we call it.
Okay.
So our tendency is to try and stay on the lower side of concentrated sap. Sometimes in the industry today you'll see 30 and 40% sugar content. Our markets are geared towards a lower number. We tend to be in the 12 to 15 max.
Why is the difference there?
For us, we're more geared towards maple flavor in the syrup. I want my customers to taste the same syrup and the same flavor that they had when I was making it over a wood fire in the backyard. So that's part of why we've kept that number lower. In the last few years, we found that there are ways to help enhance that. However, if I'm at 30% sugar coming out of the RO, it probably won't get enough time in the evaporator with a steam rig to make some of the darker grades of syrup that we, sometimes we can make it darker, but we try to make it as light as possible because that's what the trees are producing. We want it to be to that level.
Okay.
And we want the golden syrup, that really light, delicate flavored syrup, to have the flavor that balances with that.
Okay.
And for when it's to be really dark, for it to be that full maple flavor like we traditionally knew. So
Gotcha.
For us, that has been the sweet spot for us. We might see some times in the future where we'll go to 20%, but I think that's about the highest that we'll go. So once it comes through the RO, we keep the concentrate to boil, and we have 2 methods of using that. We have the bulk tank outside, which is basically a milk tank. It's 4,000 gallon. We're able to turn the sap, or take the sap down to about 32 degrees and keep it very cold. That makes it so that if a customer of ours has a problem, or somebody that we know that makes syrups having a problem, I can then go help them and just let the RO run. I might boil the sap tomorrow, or I might come back in that night and boil
Gotcha.
it. For us, it's not a method of trying to hold it for long periods of time. It's a matter of trying to keep the product as pristine as possible in the meantime between when the RO runs and when we make the syrup. We can do that, or we can put it into a tank that'll feed directly into the evaporator.
Okay.
If I'm already boiling, everything that goes through the RO is going to go right into the evaporator, because we know that window between sap coming from the tree and made into syrup, the shorter it is, the better it is.
Yeah.
So we try like crazy to make sure that everything that runs today is boiled today. There's some impracticality with that, that does not help family life. And having children, I would like to know them well before they are in college. If I follow that principle to the T, it won't work.
Yeah.
So that's why, the automated ROs, the chiller tank and such. However, the principle is we want to keep that as fresh as possible.
Yeah,
going
for
in.
sure.
So in the back room here, we have a steam generator, and I'll be glad to walk you back there. And then that feeds the evaporator. So we'll go right through this door, and it's a little bit austere looking.
I feel like I'm on a train.
This is the steam evaporator.
Wow.
Or generator, and this is 125 horsepower and about 6 million BTUs. So it makes it so we can make syrup really quick, really efficiently. So steam goes through the large 4-inch pipe that you see overhead, and then into a set of steam valves right behind what we call the rig, or the evaporator itself. So this transports the steam. So by coming off the top of the header, we're able to get what we call dry steam instead of wet steam, which we would have at the bottom. In other words, it has less liquid in it. And then it'll come through these pipes. We can adjust the pressure that's going on each coil. So in the evaporator, it'll just be small tubes that run down through, and a lot of heat exchange. And then, hot water comes back out
down here
into these F&T traps, and then back up through a return line to a feed tank in the other room, which then goes right back into the evaporator, or into the boiler.
Okay, so it's like a closed
So
circle.
it's a continuous loop. Consequently, it's fairly efficient because you're just going to reuse that material or that water.
That's awesome.
Then this evaporator, so I told you the first one that we had was 5 gallons of evaporation an hour. This does about 660 gallons an hour of evaporation. So depending on what we put in for sap, we'll make somewhere between 120 and 160 gallons of syrup in an hour.
Wow.
Which is phenomenal. The boiler or the steam generator is automated, and then this has electronic valves that turn on and off based on level of the sap. And then we set, on this here, we set the temperature that we want the syrup to draw off. Syrup boils 7 degrees above the boiling point of water. Of course, the boiling point of water changes from day to day or even moment to moment. That specific density we check with a hydrometer or a refractometer. Typically we use all 3: temperature probes, refractometer, and a hydrometer. Then when we get enough, we run the syrup through a filter press here on the side. And these are a diatomaceous earth filter press.
Oh.
So most of the beverage industry uses that technology. It's the same thing that pools use, only this is a food grade product as versus pool. The diatomaceous earth looks, it looks like flour. So most people wonder, what are you putting into the syrup? It's actually the filter aid. It's the filter itself. The paper holds that, and then the paper catches that DE, or the diatomaceous earth, and only pure syrup comes through. So we'll see in these sight levels, or these sight tubes, a nice crystal clean, pristine syrup coming out. And so that makes it so that we know once it leaves the filter press that it's ready to be bottled.
Okay.
So
then it goes up and over.
Then it goes through that pipe up over into this water jacketed canner, which is a bricks tank, is what we call it. So the reason for that is we can hold more than 1 drum at a time. So we can hold basically 4 or 5 drums in that at a given time. So we can then, if we're bottling, we can run it through the bottling line. Sometimes we'll bottle during the day when we have the order filled. We try not to hold syrup on the shelf for longer than 3 weeks here. We're trying to bottle it fresh and get it out to the customers. So we want it to be as fresh a pack as possible. So 3 weeks is what we target. So we'll bottle frequently. And we're able to do, like if we're doing gallons, we can do about 1,150 gallons in a day in a 7-hour period.
Wow.
With this system, which is decent for us.
Yeah.
In the old days, I don't even want to guess how many gallons it was. It wasn't much. The technology change there has been helpful, and this will continue to grow and change as time goes on. We've been blessed to have some really good markets, people that have worked with us for years, and that's helping us to grow the business. Right now, the bulk market of syrup is not as good as it was.
So you mentioned in the, what room do you call that? The boiling room?
In the sugar house.
Okay, so in the sugar house, you mentioned that the price of syrup is not the same as it was 10, 20 years ago. You said it fluctuates like milk does. Why is that?
So there's several factors that come to play. Supply. Canada had their best season ever this past year. Their weather was much cooler than ours. So that's a factor. The exchange rate is a key factor. And then there has been a lot of growth in the industry. And we've said for a long time that the market was outpacing the growth, but I think that has flip-flopped. And so you're starting to see packing facilities have enough to go for a year packing on hand. Our coolers are full right now. I mean, we've got a lot of syrup here. So if you'd like some, we'd be glad to help you out. We do have a website. You're welcome to check that out. But something that we can be doing is trying to help people understand that maple is not just a topping. It's an ingredient, just like sugar is. It's a much healthier sugar. When it comes from the tree, it's 100% sucrose. So it's all 12 molecule sugars. As bacteria and heat act on the sap, it will split or invert, and we'll get 2 6 molecule sugars. So in maple syrup, you not only have sucrose, but glucose and fructose. Consequently, with that complexity of composition, it is much easier for the body to digest. Of the natural sugars, it stands most always in every comparator that I've seen at the top of the list. There are a lot of great natural sugars out there. Of course, we're prejudiced.
Yeah.
We think maple's the best. And in our home, we don't use cane sugar. The only time that we use cane sugar is if we're making cotton candy. The rest of the time, it's syrup. We can just lower the amount of liquid that we put in a recipe. Or if we're trying to suspend that sweetener or keep the mix dry, then we'll actually use the sugar, which is pure syrup, poured into a heating device, heated up from 219. We'll take that up to about 270 degrees, and then we put it through a mixer. That crystallizing happens in the mixer, and then it's so hot that it pretty much evaporates out. So we're like 2% moisture rather than being liquid.
Yeah.
And so that's a great product that we've seen a lot of growth in that industry. We used to make a couple batches a year. Pretty much have to do a couple batches a week, and I never, like right now, I don't have lots to give somebody, so I have to make more tomorrow morning.
Wow.
So it's a growth area. One of the other things that we do is the maple candy, which you see here right now. My daughters have been working to pack some of it. This is actually a crystal coated. What we do is we take and make the candy like you would traditionally, and then we dip it in syrup, let it sit for a length of time, and then we pull it out and let it dry on these racks. So once it's dried, it'll have a crunchy crust, a very thin crust to it. Sometimes with the shiny crystals on the top.
I saw it when I was zooming in here.
And then in the center will be more like melt in your mouth chocolate. And that's how the candy works. We also make maple cream, which is another product that it's basically spreadable maple candy. How could you go wrong, right?
Oh.
So it's excellent in combination with peanut butter. We also make cotton candy. We make popcorn. We do maple ice cream at certain events, which is a soft serve product.
Right.
If you have any other ideas, give me a shout. But we have a lot of recipes that use maple, and we think it's truly a great way for you to sweeten your products and know that it's healthier than other alternatives.
Yeah. I know I always try to do either honey or maple. And being in Indiana, there's not a lot of maple trees that are tapped. There's some, but not a lot. Lots of honey though. So I will go either honey or maple. And if I can't find them, I am not a happy camper.
Yes.
Because you really do notice the difference. I mean, you really do taste it. You feel the difference. I love that. So you've got all of these products available. You said you're at the Ithaca Farmers Markets on Saturdays.
Yes, ma'am. We do the Ithaca Farmers Market, and that is open from the beginning of April through Christmas weekend.
Okay.
So on Saturdays, you'll find us in our booth, same booth every single week, and we'll be glad to help them there.
Yeah, that's awesome. You also have your website. So we'll put any links that you have, socials, website, all of that in the description so people can look at those. And I have to ask, can I try a candy?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
One of those or
Yep.
one?
Why don't you gals get her one?
I just want it real. The candies are calling my name. I was like, that looks really good.
You can just take one.
Take one? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's good.
From a tree.
From a tree.
From a tree.
God love trees.
Yes.
That was good. That is like really sweet though. I have a huge sugar tooth. And sometimes I don't have limits. Most of the time I don't have limits.
Yeah.
But I can feel like the limit on this, right?
Oh, yes.
You're like, one of these and I'm okay.
And that's what I find. So when I first got married, we've been married for 15 years, my wife and I. And my wife was not a maple guru. She was not a maple buff, although I was, obviously. It wasn't a big deal to have syrup every day. And the candy, the only thing that she wanted from the candy were the little teeny tiny pieces. But I will tell you, when she sees coated candy, she's getting some coated candy.
Yeah.
So Holly, here you go. There's lots of coated candy. And we have to have syrup on the table, because if we run out of syrup, it's not a good day. It's not a good day. I use it in my coffee
I see her.
every day.
She's like, yeah, it's not a good day.
Yep. There's always a comment or two about the cobbler and his shoes if we run out of maple.
That's awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much for showing me around. I've learned so much here. This is amazing. I'm definitely going to make sure I get some of your syrup because we need good syrup in our household. But thank you. I really appreciate you having me out.
We're glad to do it. And I would encourage people, if you're in the area and you want to stop in, we're glad to show you around. I'm also president of the New York State Maple Producers Association, so I just put in a plug there. We have what we call Maple Weekends in the spring. It's during season typically, other than that weather factor. About 150 sugar houses open their doors and invite the public in. We do that as well. It's a big opportunity for people to see how it's made, we'll have demonstrations here of, maple candy or maple cream, the boiler's running, the ice cream machine will be going, and there'll be food. There's talk of fireworks and things like that. So we try to put on the best event that we can. And so if somebody's interested, New York State Maple Producers Association.
We'll throw a link for that as well.
Yes, and mapleweekend.com. So those are two great opportunities to look for places in other areas that make syrup in New York State.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah. So the only big experience that I've had from the maple producers side of things is I went to a small place in Indiana quite a few years ago with my mother-in-law, and we watched them, how they tap trees, and we did a little nature walk and everything. But this is on a much bigger level than that, and he says he's not even big. But this is absolutely amazing. It makes me wonder if wherever we settle down, will we have some maple trees that we can tap? I don't know, but I would love it if we did. Keep watching, we've got so much more to come. If you haven't, make sure that you join the Facebook group, Breaking New Roots group on Facebook. We're just gonna keep the conversation going there. And otherwise, just keep watching, sharing, liking, commenting. We will be on at the next